So, welcome everybody to another episode of the Data Driven Supply Chain. Today, I'm your host, Yassine, and we'll talk about an important topic in procurement, supply chain in general, which is how to handle a complex, multidisciplinary project. And to do so, we have an expert in project management with us. You already know him, Hamad. Thank you for being here and to answer my questions. Can you present you us? Can you present you a bit your background in project management in general? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thank you, Yasin, for having me today. Project management for me goes back like almost a decade. So I've been in multiple project roles, mostly related to software. But when I got to more of general business management, I found the approach to be quite effective in managing almost any kind of thing that you could define as a project, where there's a allocated start and end date. So yeah, I've worked in a lot of projects, have been part of successes, failures. There's a lot in there. So quite excited to be here today.
Fantastic. So you'll be able to answer my burning question about this sphere, which I'm still also learning a lot. It has enormous amount of depth. So let's start easy, where everybody start. Well, how do you start a complex project that you have to manage with like multiple people involved in different departments? How do you even go about starting something like this?
Yeah, there's a couple of key things that you need to keep track of when you're starting a project. First thing, and I guess what goes with anything that you start, is being able to define the scope of what a project is. Right? A project, generally, the way I differentiate a project and a product is a project has a start and end date, where a product does not have an end date. So anything that has a start and end date, the first thing you want to do is define the scope, which means you're identifying the goals, the objectives, the deliverables. What is it that you have to deliver at the end of it? And then after having this established, and that's the most important thing, then you work your way backwards to the resources and how you want to move forward. So first, get the scope established and set that in place. Second thing I would say for a complex project specifically, you need is a good plan. You want to have a detailed plan, which is comprehensive, that outlines all the activities, all the timelines, all the resources that you need to do in a project. And one very important thing is to have a good risk management plan also outlined with your project plan. If you read, for example, the PMI Institute, they'll tell you only 35% of projects get completed on time. Maybe around 46% are completed within the budget, and only like 40% of the projects meet their original goals and objectives. So these things change over time. That's a reality that happens, which is why a good project manager, especially when it's a complex project, will have a good risk management plan also included in the project. Third thing is, once you have those allocated, once you have those set, then you want to look at your resources, right? Identify the key resources. This is personnel, this is funding, this is equipment. You want to make sure all of that is in place and you have a good transparent overview of what's needed there. Then you build your team. Once all of that gets started to get approved, you build your team. You identify the skills and expertise and competences that you need, and you define the role for each of them. Next, a very important part, which I've personally have had a lot of challenge with, is having a good communication plan. There's multiple people in a project. Some people just like to be informed. Some people or some stakeholders want to be involved in the decision-making process. For you to be able to identify them and have a good communication plan of how you're going to give updates, how you're going to have meetings. And then even with your team, you want to make sure there's a good cadence set up. And then once all of those things are there, then it's like you call this like more of like a monitor and control stage. But that's where you have a new reality and it hits you on every step of the way. But again, if you created a good project plan, had a good risk management plan, you should be able to navigate your way throughout that. So Yeah, that's on a very high level how you can sort of have a guideline or a framework to manage complex projects.
Just this, I think it's a very good insight because uh, the natural tendency is that you work with what you have to hit the goal. So you start in reverse, actually. You start with like the
Yeah,
folks that you have, and you have a bunch of people in different teams that
yeah,
want to
yeah,
get involved into that thing. But it's the wrong way of looking at it. You have to look
yeah,
at, okay, we want to get there, and I need
yeah,
this, and then we're gonna
yeah,
do this, and this is the how we're gonna manage risk.
yeah.
Oh, that's good. And on this particular point about failure, um, so, can you restate how the project most likely fail? And the other thing I want to know is like, if change management and the changing goal is such a big issue, how do you handle that?
Sure. So I'll first start with like why projects fail. So I shared with you a number from PMI. There's different numbers from PwC where they say like 37% fail because of unclear requirements, around 35 because of timelines not managed properly, and 37 around 37% because of changing requirements. Because you start something, you realize, hey, this is not what I was expecting, although we defined it. But when the final result came out, this is not what you were expecting, and you had to have some kind of change management put in place. But essentially, I would sort of maybe point out like five main things that are, in my experience, in my personal experience, been like at the edge of why projects fail. First, and I think the most important one, is lack of clear goals and objectives. We tend to start a project and we're not sure what is it that we really want. Like we saw something somewhere, or there's somebody build an amazing airport in some country and we're like, hey, this is what I want. That's not an objective. That's kind of like this is a wish, right, that I want to get to. So
There's a lot of
having
these.
yeah, not having them clearly stated, the clear goals and objectives clearly identified, with all the team members, and alignment amongst stakeholders. When it's a complex project, there's not one person who's responsible for it. Sometimes you have government, sometimes you have different managers, different executives who are all part of like your project steering committee, who have some stake in this project, and identifying them early on and having clear objectives and identifying the objectives that the project is supposed to deliver. That's the number one reason. I used to think initially that's not the main one, but I'm telling you, this is really why most projects fail. Second one is the one that you would think naturally, is lack of resources. It does happen. And it basically also stems back to the objectives, because if you're not clear on the objectives, if you don't know what you want to do, then you don't know what you need to do that, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it kind of is interconnected. And so, and it goes all the way to funding, staff, equipment, whatever you need to be able to get that into place. Third reason that I would point out is communication. It's essential for projects, because in project, you're probably working with cross-functional team. Everybody comes with their own biases, different mindsets. And because the project progresses over time, you need to have a clear understanding of, for example, what does done mean, right? Like I said, hey, it's done. What does it mean? Did I finish the whole scope? Did I finish a sub part of what I was expected to do? This establishing those early on helps you avoid misunderstanding, delays, and errors in the whole project. And in today's world, you're probably doing it remotely, so there's not a lot of visibility on what's actually being done, which is why establishing that is super, super critical. Fourth would be changing requirements, and that happens a lot, right? Like you establish the objectives, you got the resources for it, but something happened. The requirements changed. COVID happened, or whatever happened. You could have certain events that could take place, which sometimes are in your control and sometimes out of your control. Being able to manage that, and being able to keep on top of that is a big challenge. And sometimes that's why they fail. You started a project thinking thinking that, like, we're gonna. I'll give an example of, let's say, procurement, right? Like you started a project, you were going to build an aircraft. For whatever reason, the funding stopped, right? Like now what do you do, right? Like you don't have the funds. How are you going to manage this change in the requirement? And the last would be, for me, would be planning. If you don't have a detailed project plan and not the right documentation and all of that not set up properly, it can lead to it can lead to a lot of failures, because sometimes you have multiple people that are going to be coming onto this project later on in the cycle, and if they don't have the right context, it gets difficult for them to catch up. Or sometimes your contractor leaves, or I don't know, supplier changes. If they don't have the whole context of how you got there, it's very difficult for them to then catch up. So having proper documentation, having a good plan established is super important to make sure that this project stays on top. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
That makes a lot of sense. Like about why things change so much. If let's say the communication with the stakeholder is not clear, and even them, they don't know what they want.
True.
Because
True.
if they don't want, they don't know what they want, and there are multiple of them. Um, there's zero chance that you're gonna get somewhere,
Yeah.
because they're pointing in different
Yeah.
direction, right?
Yeah.
And I see it even like with the people that are kind of close. Like even when I'm doing a project, let's say when I was doing research,
Yeah.
sometimes even the folks that you like super align, but you're talking about, let's say, one specific project and how to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
the stuff, and then you see a bit of misalignment because you were not thinking the same thing, and
Yeah.
not making this explicit at the start is a major point of failure, I think. So since the stakeholders are so important, and like they are the one deciding like where you want to go, and we have to be clear on that.
Yeah.
How do you manage them? How do you work with them if like they're technically supposed to be higher above in the hierarchy than you?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a great question. The first important thing you want to do is to be able to identify them, and you're going to be like, hey, why do I need to identify? No, like the boss is the stakeholder, or the one who's funding the project is the stakeholder. But that's never true. The stakeholder is anybody who has a stake in this project, and that's what a lot of times project managers overlook, right? Like your customer who's going to use is a very important stakeholder. Anybody who is going to interact with this project, regulators, suppliers, other parties, government who has interest in this project is a stakeholder. And it's super important for you to identify these stakeholders. You will be surprised at so many projects where the boss is happy, everybody's happy, but some rule, some law came into place that sort of overrid everything that was supposed to be part of the project. So first thing, to be able to manage them, you need to know who they are, where they are, what is their involvement in the project. Second thing, it's a cliche, but understanding their needs. Each of them come in with a different stake. They have different interests. They have different concerns about the project. And as a project manager, you want to take the time to understand their individual needs and account different perspectives into your overall project strategy. So having a good understanding of their needs, establishing that early on when you're doing that project plan is critical. Third thing is communicating effectively. It's super important, especially since if they're diverse, making a good communication channel, which is regular and clear to the stakeholders, and asks for their feedback in different stages for the project will help you help you get that insight as the project is progressing. So you will be able to detect those changes or detect the change in interest as the project starts to process. And again, there's no fixed style. Some people like in person. It could be a meeting where you get everybody. Sometimes it's just a phone call, sometimes it's a survey, but there needs to be communication happening with the stakeholder based on their engagement and interaction with the project. So I don't expect you to sort of try to call all the future customers who are going to be part of it, but you need to have a way to be able to sense that. Fourth, setting clear expectations, and then basically communicating the expectations every time, right? Like when you do a project, you want to make sure you're able to say what has been done, what's in the timeline, and how is the project progressing. And you want to make sure that this is being communicated stakeholder wide, and every stakeholder, based on their interests that you identified, is being able to you're being able to communicate that information, or have those expectations delivered as you're moving forward. And then a big part of it, a big part that I think once you start a project you start to see is conflicts. There's definitely going to be conflicts that you'll see. One stakeholder is going to say something, another one is going to have a different opinion about it, and there needs to be, you need to put in place as a project manager, since you're the one who's been identified with the decision making authority, to be able to have healthy conversation, identify first, maybe identify potential sources of conflicts early on so that you can manage them better. And then once they happen, have a good resolution plan for them in place. So when two stakeholders have different opinions, either through dialogue or whatever means necessary, you're able to remove these impediments from your projects. And then I guess last thing is like have a good stakeholder engagement plan. So be able to just very similar to the expectations, be able to communicate with progress updates, engagement activities with your stakeholders regularly. So it's the life of a project management. There's this joke is like a project management never sleeps is actually true, because there's so many things that can go wrong, and your job is to make sure that anything that can go wrong is sort of mitigated early on. If it goes wrong and you did not think about it, and if it was like an unknown, you're the captain of the ship. So you need to make sure you're able to divert it into the right direction. And I think this is more of a muscle that you build. You have to do a few projects yourself, have to deal with conflicting stakeholders, and as you progress through these guidelines, you start to get better and better as you move.
God, that makes so much sense. Like that that the stakeholders are so at the center of it, and they're dictating the goal, which like are dictating the rest and the resource that you have, and that a failure to map the stakeholder 100% lead to a failure to
Yeah,
land the project. Like let's say you didn't map the customer in the
yeah,
project, and you deliver the
yeah,
stuff, and then everybody's happy, but then the
yeah,
customer is not,
yeah,
or the legislature are not. Like you said, it's kind of like useless. You did all of this work for nothing. Okay, I
yeah,
get that. In your like okay, the stakeholders are unlocked. You have a change management process in place. You're doing good with like the main source of failure, but like there's always stuff that goes wrong, right? Like
yeah,
I never
yeah,
seen a project that goes 100% right, even
yeah.
with like the best project manager. So how do we avoid the major source of delays in a
Right.
project? Let's say like something unexpected happened. How do we do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Take the example of this Terminal 5 in London Heathrow, right? Like this was a project with hundreds of suppliers, so many things involved, and it got really delayed. It got delayed up to years before this thing was completed. It was launched. It was a failure. There was so many instances that happened into it. But when you could get to delays, I think one of the most important skill of a project manager is to be able to do root cause analysis very fast. And delays happen in the shape of symptoms, and delays happen in the shape of root causes. For example, let's say there's a part you're waiting for, right? Like there's a part that it's supposed to arrive, and you're supposed to use that for your project, and the part is delayed. Right now, the part is late, and your sort of instinct is to go and try to sort of get the part on time. That's the outcome you want to try to get. Is I just want to get my part on time. But the cause of the delay, the cause of the delay could be multiple reasons, and it's very important for a project manager to know why this part got delayed. Like, yes, we can fix it, and we can find another supplier that's going to get us a part. But if I don't identify the root cause, I'm not going to be able to scope future unforeseen circumstances. And when it's a complex project, there's so many things that's happening. So the first thing is identifying the root cause, and in that, like sort of controlling your instinct to just solve everything. That's not what you want to do. You want to be able to understand and identify, and you'll learn so much from that process. So maybe the raw materials are short in the market. If I know that's the cause of the delay, I know everything else that uses this raw material will also be delayed. So I need to plan about it from today. Second thing is prioritizing my stuff. That is so difficult as a project manager because you have thousands of activities to manage and do, and it's just critical for your project success to be able to prioritize them accordingly. And there's this complication of dependencies, right? Like when let's say I'm building an infrastructure, when the contractor for the base finishes, then only the other contractors can start to build the rest of the building. If this guy is late, everybody else is late. So this needs to be prioritized first. That's just an example for you to know. So like everything where another party is dependent to start their work, the first party needs to finish first, needs to finish earlier. So that prioritization is something that the project manager needs to take care of if they want to manage delays. Third thing is you're going to create this awesome plan in the start of your project, and just 60-70% of this time this plan is going to blow over your head, right? And you need to know how to adjust your project plan. That's a very important skill, right? Like some people are meticulous, they like perfection, but that's if that's how you like things, then being a project manager is not the career you wanna have, because it's gonna fail. Things are gonna go down. So in your head, psychologically, and you need to have that tough skin to be able to adjust your plan according to the changes, and then face the new reality, and then see how you can manage those delays and see how you can basically mitigate those risks. 6 is always keep track of stuff. There's just this beauty in having a daily stand-up, 5 minutes, just to make sure, or depending on the team or your teams, to have those daily stand-up meetings. They are there for a purpose, which is for the team to be able to tell you. So you can't just have a plan, give it to the team, and they'll just do everything. You need to be able to regularly track progress and identify not only delays, but potential delays. So the question is not, hey, what's not working? But the question is, what do you foresee being a challenge? And if these are identified by you earlier, then just like we talked about procurement and parts, just a buyer knowing that the part is going to be late can help them do series of things which will help to mitigate the risk. The same principle applies here. Last thing, do a good postmortem after the delay. The delay happens. They're going to be if it's a long project, you're going to have multiple delays. Use the delay as an opportunity to learn, improve your process, identify what worked well, what didn't work well, and do a good postmortem for those delays. Don't just if there was a delay and you figured it out, you solved it, that's not the end. The end is once you do a good postmortem of it and understand, you'll be better equipped to manage delays from there on.
Yeah, you can solve it forever, not just like the
Exactly.
symptom of it.
Yeah.
And this
Exactly.
is good stuff, because I remember at some point in the pandemic in the aerospace industry, like there were some specific raw material were kind of out of stock everywhere, and then everybody was freaking out. But like they were trying to find new supplier, but if they're if they all don't have them, it won't work. Like maybe if one of them like stocked it, maybe that will work. But understanding the root cause of it, that it's not because of him or them, it's because of where they're getting the raw material from, which has another cause.
Actually, I'll take a second to ask maybe you a question, because you have more experience on the procurement side of things. How do you find? So I'm speaking more in general in terms of overall project management, specifically because I know most of the listeners are from the procurement field. How do you see procurement managers, kind of / I would even call them project managers, because they're responsible for working with an external party. There's a time bound to it, and then they need to deliver something by the end of that time, and there's multiple people involved, their managers, the suppliers, and everything. How do you see those learnings applied to procurement as a whole, and what do you think specifically procurement managers should be looking at when they are procuring parts / managing projects?
Yeah, well, the thing is, uh, most, especially in manufacturing, most procurement manager that I've seen were always in reactive mode. Um, they were always just like clearing up like the fire that they have right now. And it's as if like every part that they're trying to source, or like parts for a project or whatnot, is a separate project that they're trying to run, and they seem to not have any breathing room to kind of improve the over the rest of the stuff. And when they do, for whatever reason, um, they're usually focused on the wrong thing. Um, yeah, that's kind of my impression here. I think like from experience and from what I've seen and helped a bunch of them, when you just give them uh, enough visibility to know what's happening without having to always react, it helps tremendously. It's like giving headlights in a car at night, right? It's much, it's fantastic. When it's daylight, it's fine. But when you're at night, it's fantastic. You can see like what 4 or 5 meter away. You can plan, it's fine, and you can drive your car. But right now, they're kind of running with most of them are running with like no headlights, um, and very little visibility. So they're always like kind of going left and right. Um, so yeah, that's my first the main thing. The rest is kind of, I from what I've seen, they're very meticulous and detail oriented project manager because they have to. If you're running a project with like um the the most bare minimum tool, you have very little margin for error. You start to become like paranoid about what can go wrong. So you're very fast, and you usually kind of manage yourself not that bad. But you can never get to a level where you can run like very complex project for a long period of time because you don't have enough visibility ahead of you to do that. Which, in my opinion, is one of the core thing. Like one thing you said was like, hey, just having this 5 minute and 10 minute daily meeting helps getting visibility about what can go wrong. The project in procurement are so complex that you can't really have daily meeting with like your suppliers. They have other stuff to do. They have other customers, right? And then you have other mini project like this stacking up with
True,
like potentially hundreds of suppliers.
true,
So
true.
this is not possible.
Yeah,
Having visibility about, hey, we're doing great here, oh, there's an issue over there, is one of the core thing that I've seen missing like all across the board.
true, true. No, definitely, definitely. That's I guess that's what maybe kind of like differentiates the procurement folks a little bit from like classical project managers. But there is 100% a lot of similarities between the work they do and the work the way that work affects. It's more, I would say, their work is often more repetitive in nature, whereas in a project you have a start and an end. But it's like they manage multiple projects at the same time. Yeah,
That's my feeling here.
yeah,
It's like multiple mini projects. Some of them are longer because let's say
true,
you have to procure
true,
something a bit more complex and it's
true,
like
true.
difficult, or like you're running an RFP, so like this will take a long time, and then it will go
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
RFP process. You might chop this down, but then at the same time, you have all of these mini things that you have to procure at the
yeah,
same time. So
yeah,
it's really like how I see it is like there's a one big project
yeah,
which is like
yeah,
the procuring stuff for your company. It's kind of like a product because it goes forever, and then
yeah,
you have 100 mini project of varying size getting
yeah,
dumped
yeah,
constantly. They're getting dumped, failing for whatever reason because you have like you have too many stakeholders. You have the legal,
right.
finance, you have the engineering that need this stuff.
True.
You have your own procurement reality, and then you have the
Yeah,
suppliers which have their whole downstream stuff also.
yeah,
So it gets very complex to manage, especially in a time where they actually don't have that much time. They don't have that much breathing room to get the stuff done.
Definitely, definitely.
So, on that note, any other tips you have for people handling these kind of complex projects?
Let me think. Yeah, I guess the first, and I think that I've mentioned it again, and I don't think I can mention it enough, is establishing goals and objectives. That is super, super important with all your stakeholders. Make sure they are written, make sure they're signed off, do whatever it needs to ensure that these are well in place with you. The second, I would keep it maybe more in line with, since we spoke a lot about procurement, is have a good system in place. There's a lot of tech that is being built around you being able to keep track of your projects. In classical project management, we use Visio, we use other softwares that help us, kind of like keep track of how the project is progressing. In procurement particularly, there's a lot of tools. You don't have the luxury of doing the daily stand-ups, but I know there's tools that help you track things and flag stuff for you in the same fashion, just like a daily meeting would do. Make use of them. Ensure that you are using those advanced tools, because you need those tools not when things are good. You need those tools when things are starting to get a bit more challenging. They will save your life. They will help you get to be able to monitor progress and make adjustments much earlier before they become failures. And then I guess the last thing would be have good communication channels set up. It's so important to be able to communicate. And again, it goes back to the tools. Those tools will help you broadcast your communication effectively, and they will help you make sure that every stakeholder, every person involved in the project is getting a good update, and that they're doing their work with the new context in mind, whatever has changed throughout the project. So yeah, those I would definitely say are some tips. And again, tools, I wouldn't get specifically into the tools, but there's hundreds of out there. You might need
anything but Excel.
Yeah. Don't use Excel. Don't use Excel to manage projects, because Excel is like this tool that sits in your PC, which nobody has visibility over, and no one knows what's going on in there. So use a tool that all your stakeholders are using. Definitely don't do stuff on Word. You go and change the whole plan and nobody knows about it. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it truly is. Well, thank you, Hamad, for these beautiful tips. Managing complex project is difficult. It's not like it's not like it's a managing simple project times 10. It's like times 10,000. It require a very good expertise and a very good system, both procedural and tooling in place in order to be able to do them effectively.
Right.
So fantastic. People can reach out to you through LinkedIn.
100%.
Thank you for being here. We might do some other ones like this. I want to get all of that knowledge about project management, share it with our folks. This has been the Data-Driven Supply Chain. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.